Freddie Mercury is widely regarded as one of the greatest singers in rock history. Known for his flamboyant stage presence and huge range, there's lots of theories going around about what made Freddie Mercury so good. Did his extra incisor teeth really aid his singing? Was his vibrato better than Pavorottis? What made Freddie Mercury great? Freddie Mercury had an incredible 4-octave range which he maintained throughout his entire career. Now, because of this range, it's pretty hard to label Freddie as a baritone or a tenor, but for the sake of perspective, let's look at an average male voice. So the average male voice has a range of about 1.4 to 2 octaves. A trained singer has an average range of 1.7 to 2.4 octaves, so around a G2 to a G4. Freddie's range was an F2 to F6, with a powerful mix up to an F sharp 5, which, to be quite frank, I would struggle with as a soprano. You can hear that F2 in the backing vocals on the word Gone in All Dead, and an F sharp 2 in Don't Try Suicide.
Of course I don't believe you're dead and gone. So you take this easy way out.
And here are those amazing whistle high notes that he uses more as a vocal texture or an exclamation. Now, you can hear them kind of buried under the instruments in the first clip and more prominently in the second. And always my favourite, that powerful mix in 1 Year of Love.
I'm a prisoner of love inside you. I'm falling apart.
But where did his range come from?
I was born with 4 additional incisors. More space in my mouth means more range.
Is this true? Did his range come from his extra incisors? Well, our range is mostly defined by genetics, the size and flexibility of our vocal cords. Longer vocal cords mean you have a lower range than someone with smaller vocal cords, and the tighter you can stretch them, the higher you can go. Our mouth is part of the resonant chambers that help us shape our tone. So creating different shapes with our vocal tract, which is the tube above the vocal cords and the mouth, is part of what helps us hit high notes with more ease. But it isn't what determines the pitch. So Freddie's mouth size may have helped him hit those high notes with more ease, but it wouldn't have determined his ability to hit those notes in the first place. It wasn't just his range that's been attributed to his teeth, but his distinctive tone. It's big and powerful, yet warm and comforting. Now, the size of our mouth almost certainly affects our tone. It's part of the resonance system that gives it its unique colour. If your voice were a guitar, the vocal cords would be the strings, the source of the sound, and the mouth and the vocal tract would be the body of the guitar, the part that amplifies. However, unlike a guitar, we can all adapt the size and shape of our vocal tract and our mouth to a certain extent. It's part of how we can mimic other people's voices. But what may be easy for someone with a big mouth may be harder for someone with a more petite mouth. So someone with a big mouth might find it easier to get to a shape that makes the sound big and warm than someone with a smaller mouth. But did Freddie's teeth mean he have more space? Well, dentist Fred Levine had something to say about it. In most people I've seen with supernumerary teeth, the jaw size doesn't correspond to the space needed for the extra teeth, and the extra teeth are malpositioned, protruding either to the palate or the cheeks. Freddie Mercury's jaw size had to be larger than normal to begin with to allow his extra teeth to fit into a normal arch form. So it seems Freddie Mercury might have just had a big mouth. Another tonal myth I hear around Freddie's voice is that his voice didn't change throughout the years. However, the way that he approached registers altered dramatically. You can really hear it in performances of Killer Queen. In both of the clips I'm going to show you, he still has power and drive, but in the first clip from 1974, he uses head voice a lot more and goes to a lighter placement at the top of his range. Whereas in the clip from 1981, he has a much heavier tone and uses mixed voice.
Cigarettes, well versed in etiquette, extraordinarily nice. You can't decline. Caviar cigarettes, well versed in etiquette, extraordinarily nice.
Why would this be? Well, of course he could have just liked that heavier tone. However, I think it's likely that this change came about because he developed nodules, or nodes. Nodules are the vocal cords' way of protecting themselves. They are hardened calluses on the vocal cords, and they come about because of overuse and harsh vocal techniques. Now, Freddie's schedule would have been grueling, and he wouldn't have had time to have much rest in between shows. But also remember how I said Freddie sung with power and drive. One of the primary causes of nodules is a high subglottal pressure, which means slamming your vocal cords together tightly and pushing a lot of air through them, so you end up with a lot of pressure under the vocal cords. To add to his strength of sound, Freddie used really hard glottal stops, which sound something like this. Now that is when you slam the vocal cords together really tightly just before the sound is made, and you let the air build up behind it and release that air suddenly. Both a high subglottal pressure and harsh glottal stops are really wearing on the voice. If used a lot, this causes the vocal cords to swell, and if it happens repeatedly, especially without proper rest, the vocal cords start to bruise and then start to develop calluses, nodules. Now here are some healthy vocal cords. Don't worry about the mucus, it's meant to be there, it keeps our vocal cords nice and supple. And here are vocal cords with nodules. You can see here that the nodules are on each side. This is common as the abrasive activity that causes the nodules in the first place happens on both sides. You can also see it stops the vocal cords from coming together fully. But how would this have affected Freddie's tone? Because it becomes much more challenging for sufferers to put their vocal cords together fully, air leaks through, resulting in a loss of resonance, a breathy tone, and loss of control. When we're in head voice, our vocal cords are stretched relatively thinly. It would have been much harder for Freddie to achieve a powerful tone because the air would leak through. To achieve that powerful tone, he would have had to push his vocal cords together even more tightly, increase that subglottal pressure, and keep the vocal cords in a thicker position, which sounds like mixed voice. This is a quick fix. It's not really a long-term solution as it locks singers into a cycle of harsh vocal techniques which makes the nodules worse. Nowadays, there's a lot more science around this, and if Freddie wanted to, he could have gone to an ENT specialist who would have helped him achieve his iconic sound in a healthy way and get back all the facets of his voice, including that lovely light head voice. But although it's not ideal from my vocal coach perspective, I have to say that that quality of push and pressure is part of Freddie's iconic sound, and it does kind of sound amazing. In some ways, it shows his genius more. As he works with the limitations his voice began to place on him, he adapted and used those limitations to make us feel. I need to point out that not everyone's voice can take that pressure. Even Freddie's couldn't really. And if we'd seen his voice develop further, we might have seen more of a change. Most of us have to adjust our technique early, or our voice is going to make us do that, and not many of us are as genius at adapting around our health and our vocal damage as Freddie was.
These are the days of our lives.
Like any world-class singer, Freddie knows how to use his vowels and consonants to achieve the tone and attack he wants on any given note. It sounds like he generally has a neutral larynx, he has nice open vowels, a relaxed jaw, a relaxed tongue, and a raised soft palate. And he spends a lot more time on the vowels than on the consonants. So on songs like Somebody to Love, he sings somebody to love rather than somebody to love.
Somebody, somebody,
However, he might sing something like baby, almost making that B into an M and singing on that consonant a little bit longer than you might do normally to really emphasize that slide and add a feeling of longing. In other words, he knows his voice well enough to know when to open up onto those vowels, to increase that stability, to give him a great tone, but also knows when to break the rules for stylistic effect. And I have to say, as a vocal coach, he has a fantastic E vowel. I often say to my students, when you're singing an E, you need enough space to be able to stick your thumb in your mouth. E. Check out the space that Freddie creates.
I just gotta get out of this prison cell. One day I'm gonna be free.
He uses consonants well, sometimes smoothing them out, but sometimes making them really, really crisp, like little drum beats. And this is great because it means you can hear every word that he says, but it's more than that. He's using the consonants as a musical effect, as if they're percussion. This adds to the clarity, attack, and energy.
You can beat them, treat them bad, and leave them well and die. But I'm ready, it's ready for you. I'm standing on my own.
Freddie Mercury uses breath support well when he wants to use it. This means that he can use the entirety of that remarkable range and helps him move through the registers seamlessly. However, when he's performing live, when he's really going for it, he does tend to blast his vocal cords with excessive air pressure, and we've already talked about what that does to the voice. However, the voice is resilient, and I think Freddie Mercury's voice was particularly resilient. For some people, with the proper rest, it can be okay. But singing extreme vocal styles like Queen's music is as harsh on the vocal anatomy as boxing is to the rest of our body. And we have to remember that Freddie Mercury was a natural-born vocal boxer. Not all of us can take those punches and come out still being able to sing.
So you think you can stop me and spit in my eye? So you think you can love me and leave me to die?
The way that Freddie uses his technique is interesting, but what is it about his voice that makes it so exciting? I do believe some people have something beyond what can be explained, and Freddie was, of course, one of those people. As much as there are things beyond explanation, there are also some elements that can be. Freddie Mercury was an incredibly skillful and versatile performer, capable of a whole range of artistic vocal expressions. But what are the tools that made him connect so well? What made him stand above other singers? Vibrato, which comes from the Italian vibrare, to vibrate, is a musical effect consisting of a rapid pulsating change of pitch. It's essentially a controlled wobble. Freddie Mercury's vibrato is often talked about, with many people claiming it's better than Pavorottis. Well, that's a matter of opinion, but it certainly was faster. Typically, a vibrato changes pitch at a rate of 5.4 to 6.9 Hz. Freddies moved at 7.04 Hz.
But it's been a bed of roses. No pleasure cruising. I consider it all.
It also had a distinctive irregular pattern, especially on those higher belted notes, which gave him a unique vocal fingerprint. What would have caused this faster irregular vibrato? Well, everyone has their own vibrato. Some are slower, some are faster, some cover a wider pitch range than others. However, technique does make a difference. Faster irregular vibratos tend to come from, you got it, excessive air force. Generally, the more people train their voice, the more regular and slower their vibrato comes. Freddie, instead of hiding this, made more of it, turning something that many would consider a vocal flaw into one of his greatest assets. He had great control of this vibrato. He could sing with a straight tone and take the vibrato on and off a note whenever it suited him and the song. But his vibrato wasn't always a vibrato. When he wanted to make the most of a moment, he didn't just vary the pitch, but added rapid shifts of volume as well in an effect called tremolo. You can hear him use that sound in this isolated vocal from Somebody to Love. The ooh is a vibrato and the love is a tremolo.
Ooh, finally somebody to love.
Tremolo is a really muscular action for singers and can be quite wearing on the voice. However, it adds another vocal texture, and in this case, a feeling of desperation. Often people talk about Freddie Mercury's amazing subharmonics and distortion, but what does that actually mean? Well, when we make a clean sound, our vocal cords are vibrating in lovely, regular patterns. When distortion happens, something disrupts the airflow, whether at the vocal cord level or above, making those regular patterns become irregular. We hear this as noise or distortion. Now, many people have done studies on Freddie Mercury's voice, and there seems to be a general consensus that this is happening at the false vocal folds, or the vestibular folds. These are folds of ligament and mucous membrane that lie above the vocal cords and whose main job is to protect the vocal cords. When they get in the way of the airflow and the vibrations from the vocal cords, you get distortion. This is a common technique. You hear it in everything from metal to jazz. But something different is happening with his distortion. So first of all, it's a voice distortion, so you can hear that underlying fundamental pitch. But if you listen to the distortion in this clip, you can hear it kind of has a musical quality. It isn't just noise.
Let's get it on, turn it on, and let's get everybody dancing.
So, when we hear a note, we're not just hearing one pitch, but a series of frequencies layered on top of each other. The lowest and the strongest pitch is the fundamental pitch, the one we define as the note we hear. Then we have a series of harmonics that we hear at different strengths, defining the tone we hear. It's why we can hear the difference between different people's voices. Now, these harmonics happen in a particular pattern, occurring at exactly the same multiples of the fundamental frequency each time. So the first harmonic would be vibrating twice as fast as the fundamental frequency, the second 3 times as quickly, and so on and so on. This harmonic series can, but don't always, extend under the note, making lower notes as well that we call subharmonics or undertones. Like harmonics, these follow a particular pattern. I've seen many videos talking about Freddie's subharmonics, and I've realised after a bit of research that it doesn't quite fit with my definition of subharmonics. He's not creating undertones in the subharmonics series, but he's doing something different. When Freddie's false chords come over and disrupt the airflow and the even vibrations from the vocal cords, they aren't becoming irregular, but the false chords are vibrating in a primarily even fashion as well, unlike a metal growl where they vibrate irregularly. Here in the spectrogram analysis of Freddie's voice, you can see the harmonics that come from the vocal cords, these dark lines. Then the grey areas are the uneven vibrations caused by the disruption from the false chords, which gives it that distorted edge. And then you get these lighter lines. Because of the even vibrations of the false chords, you're getting these in-between harmonics that people call subharmonics. They don't correspond to the harmonic series, but exist in their own series of multiples. Some are lower than the fundamental frequency, like our earlier definition of subharmonic, which means lower than the fundamental frequency, but they stay in their own pattern, rather than correspond to the subharmonic series. Because of the regularity of the vibrations at the false chords, you get less of that noise and something that's more warm and musical in tone. Why is this special? False chord distortions are used a lot in Western rock music. Now, this is very true. However, the false chord vibrations generally aren't as even. We actually only normally see those even vibrations to quite the same extent in things like Tuvan throat singing. If you've ever seen Tuvan throat singing live, you'll know what I mean. The sound is simultaneously powerful, yet warm and engulfing. You feel totally surrounded by the sound because you're getting all these little in-between harmonics. I doubt Freddie actively tried to do this, however it gave his distortion this unique, warm, musical tone. Freddie Mercury's musicality was without doubt phenomenal. He plays the voice like an instrument, expressing emotion through play with phrasing, using things like short, sharp staccato, hard onsets and accents, to long legato phrases and soft onsets. He picks whatever the song needs to express a particular emotion, and he changes it night to night, reacting to the audience's energy and perhaps his own mood. Freddie was a strong pianist who composed many of Queen's hits, including Bohemian Rhapsody, Killer Queen, Somebody to Love, We Are the Champions, Don't Stop Me Now, and Crazy Little Thing Called Love, using a piano or keyboard. Despite his success, Freddie didn't see himself as a great pianist, and although I agree there are better pianists out there in the world, it's this skill that allowed him to create some of Queen's amazing repertoire and informed many of his vocal choices. Freddie had a voice that could uplift an audience beyond anything I have ever seen. He was a musical genius and a bright light who gave everything he had on every performance, and his music has transcended to a place where it's so woven into our culture that I can't imagine a world without it. On a personal note, I grew up on a musical diet of Queen, Les Mis, Holst and Meatloaf. And Freddie's music provided an energetic soundtrack to my childhood and was a massive part of inspiring me to pursue a career in music. But Freddie was also much more than that. He was able to exist solely as Freddie Mercury, shunning, at least publicly, the social constraints of gender and sexuality in a genre that's traditionally displayed an aggressive and traditional form of masculinity. allowing many to see that our ideas of sexuality and gender need not be so fixed. As someone who does happen to fit into many of the social standards around these areas, he allowed me to see that I both could be who I wanted to be and truly myself, in spite of social constraints. But I can only imagine what his music must have meant to people who did not fit so neatly into the boxes that society provides us, especially when sexuality was unfortunately seen as a legal issue. And what's more, Freddie did all these things just by being unashamedly him. If that's not a sign of greatness, I don't know what is. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please do like and subscribe. This video is thanks to the patrons. If it wasn't for the patrons, these videos would not happen at all. So if you would like to support the channel and get early access to some of the content, head over to patreon.com/BethRoars. See you in the next one. Bye.
Virus.